we can share it together. It's a question that many people do ask themselves. It's something that actually creates an obstacle in the lives of people from coming to God, is the fact that they feel that somehow this world should be different if God was really good. And when it's not any better than what it is, then it really questions even the very belief in God. So my theme, as you know, is if God is good, why is there so much evil? Just let me remind you that at the end of this service, that we are putting on lunch. And there's a great lunch that's prepared. And you've got to have lunch somewhere on a Sunday, don't you? So why not have it with us? We'd love you to have lunch with us at our table. All right, let's get into this. Evil. I'm sorry that we even have to talk about it. But it is a reality, and it has been part of human history right from the beginning. Throughout history, there's been a lot of evil people. Top of the list in the modern era was Adolf Hitler. Now, I know when you're in Australia, that is kind of like a long way away, both historically and geographically. But I had the opportunity of visiting Auschwitz in Poland and just going from room to room where they interrogated, where they tortured, the gas chambers. It's just beggars belief, the depth of evil that man is capable of. But the question is, not just is evil just limited to a certain number of people, select people, or can we talk about an all-pervading force of evil? See, this is really a fundamental question. Are we just talking about a few individuals, or are we talking about something that transcends just individuals, but there is an evil force at work in this world? On the 20th of April 1999, it happened to be Adolf Hitler's birthday. Two teenagers went to their high school in the town of Columbine in the US. They were dressed in long black trench coats. And in their trench coats, they were hiding guns. They arrived in their classroom and began to open fire on their classmates. The name of these two young men were Eric and Dylan. They had fed themselves on Marilyn Manson music. Now, not to be confused with Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Manson is a bloke that pumps out a lot of very violent music. I wouldn't recommend it. They were given to satanic practices, these two guys, and their hero, no surprise, was Adolf Hitler. They chose their date well. That day they killed 13 people, one of whom was a girl called Cassie. They cornered Cassie in the school library, put a gun to her head, and asked her this question: "Do you still believe in God?" And when Cassie replied yes, they pulled the trigger and shot her dead. Well, we could put that tragedy down to two very evil young men. Except after that terrible event, a number of websites were set up honouring not the victims, but the killers. One was called I Love Eric and Dylan, and the other, In Memory of Eric and Dylan. And every day after that event, thousands of young people went onto those websites. So we ask ourselves the question, well, what is evil? Well, that's the question that philosophers ask themselves. But we don't need to define it because we see it every night on our television screens. We see it at the 6 o'clock news, don't we? We don't have to define it. It's there. It's there staring at us. Hate, violence, rape, murder, corruption, child abuse, lies, betrayal. I mean, you get to the stage where you want to turn the news off, but we can't flee that reality, especially in today's world. I grew up in the 60s and the 70s. It was a really strange time for the world. There was revolution in the air. The Second World War was over. A new generation of young people were emerging. They wanted to build a whole new world. They wanted to cast off the traditional values. In the Western world, it was the era of the May 1968 uprising of students all over Europe, especially in Paris and in France. It was the era of the hippie flower power. It was the era of Woodstock, the pill. That was a revolution at the time. The sexual revolution was opened up because of the pill. The fundamental values of society, Western societies, that the society had been built on, were being undermined and removed systematically. And evil was beginning to be unleashed through mass media as never had before. In that era, in 1971, there was one film that seemed to trigger off a whole new era of evil through mass media. It was Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. This film portrayed such decadence as never before on the big screen, showing horrific scenes of gang rape, of young people laughing as they senselessly murdered indiscriminately. And suddenly, it seemed like overnight, evil became entertaining. And evil has been entertaining the world ever since. And so we have to ask, what is behind this push towards the evil? Well, children are specifically targeted by evil. That's not going into the whole question of paedophiles and child trafficking. I remember growing up, evil was limited to an old witch with a big wart on the end of her nose. We would laugh at evil. It didn't scare us at all. But the wicked old witch, she's been replaced now by an endless succession of monsters, more terrifying than the previous ones. And the scary thing is that all these monsters, they don't relate to any reality. They're all born in the mind of a person. In the human mind, it's producing monsters to represent evil. It's something that is pretty concerning regarding the human mind. So often when there's a wave of evil that passes over society, the children are targeted. Who do you think's targeted with Halloween? Don't get me started. Who do you think's targeted with Halloween? It's children. I mean, you don't see adults walking around knocking on doors saying trick or treat. The adults are there keeping an eye on their kids, but they're not the ones. It's all for the kids, you see. And they don't realise there's a lot more trick involved in Halloween than treat. Oh, it's a lot of fun, they say. You don't mess with fire. It might be a lot of fun until you get burnt. And then it's not so fun. And then that wave that now seems to have passed, the Harry Potter wave. I mean, Harry Potter, people say, oh, well, look, nice, innocent, sweet-looking boy. He was a witch. He was a cute witch, doing witchy things. And they say, oh, but it's just passing fun. No, it's not. It's just introducing children to witchcraft. Get them dressed as witches, get them waving wands as witches, and then trying to fly on a broom like witches. I don't think any have been very successful. But it's not just trends that comes and goes. There are certain trends. I mean, putting earrings and piercing, that's a trend. Putting gel in your hair, that's a trend. The mullet is a trend. I'm not sure that in 5 years' time the guys will be wanting to wear mullets. But it doesn't matter. Tattoos, they're kind of a trend that's going to last. Because once you've got them, you're stuck with them. It's not a trend. You see, but my question is it fun? Is it just innocent? Or is society establishing evil as a norm now? where we have been desensitized to what it really is. And it is a relentless destruction of what is good to be replaced by what is evil. That's my take on it, folks. You see, children are being targeted. That is plain as day. But young people also are being targeted. And they're being targeted through video and computer games. Video and computer games are based on the fact that you are a winner if you kill. It's all about killing. The more you kill, the more you win. In one game, the more you kill, the more powerful your weapon becomes, and you go online and trade it with other people for other weapons that are even more powerful. You say, well, Vince, you know, you're a pastor, that's the way you talk and think. But listen, there are many studies that link video games and violence. The kind of violence we are seeing in southeast Queensland, don't think it's just fallen out of the sky somewhere. It has come because those very same kids have been watching all of these videos and playing these games that is gradually making them want to experience it. Listen to one of the conclusions of one of the many studies that's been done between the link between video games and violence. Playing violent video games can cause real-life violent behavior. Simulating violence, such as shooting guns and hand-to-hand combat in video games, can cause aggression, bullying, and fighting. Many perpetrators of mass shootings played violent video games. Violent video games desensitize players to real-life violence. You see, this would explain some of the real problems that we are faced with today. You only have to go down to the Gold Coast, and it's out of control. We're hopeful that a new government's going to be able to do something about it. That's not a political statement. That's just purely a societal statement. One young man summed it up like this. He said, in the beginning with computer games, there was a good guy and a bad guy, and a good guy won. Then there was a good guy and a bad guy, and the bad guy won. Now, there are no more good guys and no more bad guys. You just kill everybody. It's not getting any better, is it, folks? So children are being targeted, young people are being targeted, and adults are being targeted by evil through internet pornography. I used to have my office in Paris, near, not far, and I never intended it that way, but that's the way it happened. And a street next to where we were was a sex shop alley. And I'd have to walk past that street to go to the shops or to go to catch a train. And I would walk past and I would see respectable people sort of walking out of these establishments. And I'd look at them and I'd think, what is going on inside of your head? With feeding on all of that, what's happening up here? You see, you don't even have to go looking for it. It comes looking for you. Have you noticed that on your computer and with Facebook? It comes looking for you. You know, you get great offers for Viagra. You know, if you don't know what Viagra is, it's not Nurofen. No. And Russian women offering their services to keep you warm in winter. No thanks, Olga. I can do without you. Pornography, addiction, has become such a huge problem. And now you don't even have to go to that alley. You just go to your study and close the door, and there it is. Hour after hour, you can sit and watch people do things that not the lowest form of animal life would ever do. One young man addicted to internet pornography said to me, "It has destroyed my mind. I carry around the pictures in my mind wherever I go." He's not the only one who said that to me. See, evil has gained a lot of ground these last 50 years. It's destroyed not only minds, but relationships, families, and many, many lives. So, where is a good God in all of this? It's a pretty bleak picture I'm painting, but it needs to be painted. Does the Bible give an explanation for what's happening? Yes, it does. Very simple explanation. But the statement that's found in one of John's letters is so profound, so simple, and yet very profound. He says this: the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. The whole world lies in the power of the evil one. You may not remember back to 2010, but I certainly do, when the whole world was watching the Winter Olympics out of Vancouver, Canada. And I watched the opening ceremonies. I don't like ceremonies much, but Denise does, so I end up watching it with her, the opening ceremonies. And at one stage, there's this young guy. He had a beard on, and he comes onto the stage, and he starts playing the fiddle. And on his head there were two corns. I thought, okay, what's coming? Because Olympic Games have got, opening ceremonies have got a reputation, And there he's on stage playing his fiddle with his two corns up on his head, and suddenly appeared behind him a globe of the world that was lit up. And I thought, what's going on here? And then the lights changed. And all you could see was the globe lit up. And the young guy kept playing his fiddle and cast his shadow over the globe. And it was the devil playing his fiddle, dancing, casting his shadow over the world. When I stood there, I said, that's what John says. The whole world lies in the power of the evil one. You see, there is evil because there is an evil one. That's what the Bible says. An evil one that has a personality, that has a will, that has a name. His name is Satan. You've heard that name before, which literally means adversary. Please don't do what neighbours of ours did years ago when I was here in Brisbane as a university student. We had neighbours who used to have a big black dog, and they called him Satan. And we would hear from next door, Satan, come here. And we would, I would never call my dog Satan. But they did. Don't know what happened to him. You see, the word Satan means adversary. He is God's adversary. And if you want to do good and you want to live for God, my friends, this is not the good news. He becomes your adversary. You've got an adversary. If you want to do good and you want to live for God, you've got an adversary. You see, Satan, even the word Satan, is becoming popular today. The devil. I found a recent article. It was in Newsweek magazine from March 2023. That's only 18 months ago. And this is what it says. In November 2021, Pew Research, well-known institute of research, reported that 62% of American adults believe in hell, up from 58% in 2014. And pop culture appears to be taking full advantage of the curiosity that surrounds hell and its inhabitants. The devil is front and center in movies, TV shows, podcasts, and even children's books. There are Satan after-school clubs, while the proliferating Satanist groups have their own political divisions. There's the Exorcist Files, in which Father Carlos Martins recreates exorcisms, and the podcast routinely tops the list of the most popular in the spirituality categories. On Netflix alone, there are dozens of titles dealing with hellish demons, including Warrior Nun, Devil in Ohio, The Bastard Son, the Devil himself, and Lucifer, in which the ruler of hell runs a piano bar in California. I thought it was the pizza parlour in Newmarket. Did you know that there was a pizza shop that's called Hell in Newmarket? Go to Domino's, folks. Go to Domino's. Comedy is also fair game, the article continues. Thus, Ted Danson, don't know who he is, plays a torturous demon who who is prone to mistakes in the Netflix series The Good Place. Not since 1973, when The Exorcist was a cultural phenomenon on its way to becoming the first horror film to earn an Oscar nomination for Best Picture, has Satan been such a popular topic. There's even a children's book of demons, sample passage. Summoning demons has never been so fun. Children's book. A used copy of the controversial book published in 2019 sells for $253 American on Amazon.com. You see, folks, in today's world, there is confrontation between good and evil. And there's a confrontation between good and evil in the lives of many people today. In fact, the Bible even speaks about it, speaks very clearly about it. Let's take a moment to have a look at the confrontation between good and evil in the life of a young boy that's found in the gospel. In Matthew chapter 17, I'd like to read it to you, Matthew chapter 17, verses 14 to 18. This is what it says. And when they had come to the multitude, a man came to him, kneeling down to him, saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is an epileptic and suffers severely. For he often falls into the fire and often into the water. So I brought him to your disciples, but they could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him here to me. And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. Nothing touches us more than seeing a child suffer. Isn't that right? This boy has seizures, fits. The father thought it was epilepsy. Doctors no doubt would have called it epilepsy, even today. Or perhaps insanity, where you just slip into folly. But Jesus understood what was going on. He knew it was a demon that had taken a hold of this young boy. That's what we discover behind all of the manifestations and the terrible things that this boy had to endure, the throwing into a fire and throwing into water to try to drown him. And when you see a kid like that go through all those sort of things, you can ask deep down a question, questioning God. Why does God allow it? Why doesn't he do something? How many people have cried out to God because of the suffering of children? Why does this child have to suffer like this? Where is the God of love in this situation? If I was God, I wouldn't let that continue. Is this suffering God's will? Surely not. You see, when you don't understand the power of evil, it's hard to understand the power of God's love. Did you hear what I just said? If you don't understand the power of evil, you will never understand the power of God's love and mercy towards you. And you'll never understand why it was so important for Jesus to teach his disciples to pray, deliver us from evil. Evil needs to be delivered from us. We need to be delivered from it. The desperate father had already experienced a major, major disappointment. He was quite satisfied, not going to Jesus personally. He must have thought Jesus would have been so far beyond him, so inaccessible, with all these people around him. So he found guys that sort of hung around him, realized they were his disciples, and he thought, I'm sure that they would be able to help. I mean, they've been sent out on mission, and they've cast out demons before, and so he brings his son to the disciples, and the disciples try to do all the things that they do, and it just didn't work for them. You see, that's an important lesson. That's an important lesson, folks. Because it's not a pastor that'll deliver someone from a demon. It's not a priest. It's not a psychiatrist. It's not a psychotherapist. There's only one person that can deliver someone from evil, The father finally brings the boy to Jesus. Jesus is the good shepherd prepared to confront a bad devil. See, he's the one that does good. He's the only one that does good enough to defeat the devil and evil. Because in his name, then evil can be overcome. Can be. You see, when he comes to Jesus, the confrontation now is about to take place. And once the confrontation happens, it'll be Jesus every time. Jesus every time. I was a pastor in Paris. We used to work with pastor of Paris. But I was a pastor in Paris. Not of Paris. And so I had my office there, and one day it was coming to the end of a day, and my phone rang. And it was a man I didn't know, and he said, look, I've got a cousin in the south of France, he's a Christian, and he's suggested I contact you, and could I come with my wife for an appointment? And I said, certainly. So the following day, they came. It came after work, and so the night had fallen already when they arrived. And they were a couple that might have been in their late 30s. And so I welcomed them and invited them to come into my office, take a seat. And then they began to tell me the most horrific story. This little lady, she was only quite small. She was attractive. She was quiet. I would have said even timid. But she would go into a rage, an uncontrollable rage at any time. And she was capable of taking a kitchen knife and threatening her two children. The father was so anxious for his kids, and he was so anxious for his own life, because when she would be sitting in the passenger seat in the front when they were driving, on a number of occasions, she had tried to grab the wheel to project the car into a wall. He had reached a stage where he was so scared of his small wife that he didn't want to sleep in the same bed as her. You can understand why. And when they had to go into the car, go somewhere in the car, then he would insist on her sitting in the back seat. So finally, desperate, having turned everywhere to try to find some help in this situation, I get this phone call, and now they're in my office. And I said to them, do you understand what's happening? And they said, no, we don't understand a single thing of what's happening to her. And I thought, they have got not a clue about Jesus. They have got not a clue about spiritual life. I can't teach them everything in 5 minutes. So I just said, look, I'm going to read you a passage from the life of Jesus that I think you'll find very interesting. And so I opened up to Mark chapter 5, where Jesus cast a legion of spirits out of a man. You might know the passage. And so I opened it up and I began to read. Jesus came into the land of the Gadarenes. And as soon as I started reading, this woman lunged at me and punched me in the face, sending my glasses flying, me on the ground, chairs and carpet squares flying in all directions in my office. I mean, all hell had broken loose. I mean, we were, me and her husband, we were trying to pin her down, and I started praying in the name of Jesus against this violent spirit that had manifested itself, and I'm thinking, as I'm praying and taking authority, I'm thinking, Denise, you'll have to put off dinner, I think. I might be here all night. And so we just kept it up and kept up the pressure in the name of Jesus. And after 20 minutes, she was calm. It lifted from her. It was gone. She had her eyes closed. And I said, her name was Valerie. I said, Valerie, could you open your eyes? And she opened her eyes. I said, how are you feeling? She said, good. I said, okay. So I sat her up, and we just sat in a little corner, and I said, now I'm going to explain to you what happened. And that night I led them both to the Lord.
Thank you, Jesus.
The next morning, or the next afternoon actually, I rang the guy. And I said, so, how's your wife? I didn't bother about him. How's your wife? And he said, she's so different. She's so different. He said, I said, that's good. That's good. I said, let's keep an eye on it and let's see how she is next week. Let's have another appointment. So a week later, they came to see me again in my office. In the meantime, I'd set the carpet squares back in their place and the chairs upright, and we sat in my office again. And I said, before we get started, I'd like to read you a passage from the life of Jesus. I took my glasses off and I read, Jesus came into the land of the Gadarenes. Nothing. Quiet. Calm. You see, that night, a demon came out of her.
Yes.
And she was set free. She was set free. You see, the power of good in Jesus is so much greater
Yes.
than the power of evil. It is so much. I don't have that power. But Jesus has that power. And in his name,
Yes.
that power can confront evil and drive it from a person's life. You see, in Valerie's life, evil was expressed through violence, a violent demon. But for many, the power of evil is so much more subtle. It is inward. It is in the thoughts and in the temptations, in the mind and the emotions. It can be expressed through overwhelming jealousy and hate and anger and depression and bitterness and arrogance and fear and doubts and addictions of all kinds and sexual compulsions. How many times people have experienced this internal struggle between two opposing forces, the conflict, inner conflict between good and evil, truth and lies, love and hate, peace and anger, purity and lust, faithfulness and betrayal, goodness and wickedness. When the Father brought his Son to Jesus, there was confrontation and good overcame evil, and that young boy was set free to live his life normally, free of that demon. Good is so much more powerful, folks. Jesus is so much more powerful than the devil. Satan has no more power when he is confronted with the power of Jesus. The greatest error a man could or a woman could ever make is to think that he can deliver himself or others from the power of evil. So it's a big mistake. You see, if you think that you, with all your advice, you can set a person free, well, I encourage you then to find a Valerie. Give her all your advice and see what happens. Only don't be wearing your glasses, folks. I don't recommend it. You see, and when you discover that with all your advice it just falls to the ground powerless, weak, then you turn to Jesus. And then you see what he can do. Jesus said to that little boy's father, bring him here to me. And the boy was transformed. The good shepherd that day triumphed over a bad devil. And I'd like to be that father to you this morning. bring him here or bring her here to me. And I'd take you by the hand and I'd introduce you to Jesus so that you can discover him personally. Whatever you've been through, whatever's been the reality of your life, whatever devil has tried to get you, I'd like to take you by the hand and bring you to Jesus and experience the freedom that only he can bring. So I'd like everybody just to close your eyes right now. Would you do that? Just as we're here in the presence of Jesus, who loves Christian meetings. In fact, he loves them so much he doesn't miss out on one of them. He's here, folks. I'm not asking today if you've been brought up a Catholic or an Anglican or a Muslim or an atheist. It really doesn't matter how you've been brought up. You're a human being like all of us. And you've got a mind and a body and a heart and a soul. And you can't give it to everybody. You've got to make a choice. But Jesus says, bring him here. Bring her here to me. And so today, as a pastor, I've done this all of my life. I've helped people to come to Jesus. I've helped people that whatever their life has been like, whatever their battles have been like, help people come to Jesus. And this morning is no exception. And if you've come today and you can't really say, I know Jesus in a personal way. You can't say, I gave my life to Christ on such and such a day and that day my life changed. You can't say that. Then you probably haven't been born again. You probably know about Jesus, some of the stories, but you don't know him. And you haven't surrendered your life to following him. But you can do that now. You can seize this opportunity that this meeting is giving you, that I'm giving you. I'd like to pray with you. Is there anybody here that would say, well, Vince, you're talking to me? That's where I am at the moment in my life. And if I came, it's because I really do want to be serious with God. I want to be serious with Jesus. If that's you and you'd like me to pray for you, would you just do something very simple to do, there where you're seated, just to lift up your hand. And I will see your hand and I'll be able to pray for you. Yes, sir. Gentleman down the back. Is there anybody else that would like to just take this opportunity? Doesn't matter how old you are. Doesn't matter what you've experienced. Doesn't matter whether you've been to church or never been to church. You just want to take this opportunity because you know it's God that's given it to you. Is there anybody here? Anybody else? Just lift up your hand. I don't like rushing these moments because I understand what happens in the heart of a person. It's kind of like a bit of a tug of war. Some part of you says you're not ready, and another part of you gives a big yes. I want it. Is there anybody else? Yes, the lady down the back. God bless you. I'm just taking a moment to let this settle in your heart. This is something I can't do for you. So you can only do it for yourself. Is there anybody else? Well, what I like to do is not just pray a general prayer, but to really pray with the person